Good evening. The Minister of Police, Bheki Cele, says that the looting and violence in Gauteng over the last few days is the result of criminality. He's confirmed 5 people have now died in the violence in Joburg, Ekhuruleni and Marabastad. Cele says this is not the time to call in the army and that more people would die if soldiers were brought in. He was talking to people in Johannesburg today in a bid to stop the violence, which appears to have engulfed certain areas. Our reporter Chriselda Lewis was with them for much of the day. She's back in our Joburg studios now. Chriselda, good evening to you. What was the message from Minister Cele about what's happened over the last few days?
Well, first of all, Stephen, when he arrived at Jeppes Town, where it was one of the areas that was engulfed by violence, you would recall, I mean, it was a very hostile reception that he received there from some of the hostile dwellers, and it seemed that after he had gone into a closed-door meeting with some of the leadership of the Induna, that's when there seemed to have been an agreement that the violence should stop. He agrees, of course, that a criminal element has crept into the violence that we have seen, and basically on both sides, it seems right now, an agreement to halt the violence pending an imbizo which is to take place on Sunday. So that's when talks would go into, deep talks would go into what exactly needs to be done now, what exactly are some of the challenges that these communities where we've seen this violence take place are complaining about.
Okay, I mean, there have been various things. The Gauteng Premier David Makura said organised gangs were taking advantage of this situation. Did the Minister talk about that at all? Is there any evidence being offered of that sort of claim?
Well, absolutely. That was one of the questions that I put to Minister Bheki Cele in asking him whether he believed this violence was orchestrated. And I asked him further about, where the intelligence was. Why do we seem to have such a reactionary approach? He says it is there, but he did concede that much more can be done. He went on to make an example about a march in Pretoria yesterday, which he says they received intelligence about and, were able to halt it from taking place. But he says much more can be done. There have been instances where they've been able to, find out about incidents that are scheduled to take place and then take the necessary action. But he says much more certainly can be done to deal with some of the issues that we've seen, because I did point to him and say, I mean, if you're talking about 5 people who've died so far, in fact, just yesterday, last night, when we were out in Jeppes Town and the Denver hostel, that's where we saw 2 people caught in this violence. And certainly he says that more police need to be deployed, but again, ruling out in no uncertain terms the deployment of the army at this stage, Stephen, saying that we've got to look at this particular instance not with the same eyes as we'd look at the deployment of the army to gang-infested areas in the Western Cape. And he says, in fact, he's hoping that in the next few days, the talks that will be held would find a solution to some of the challenges that are being raised by these aggrieved communities.
All right, the imbizo that he wants to hold now, it's with Induna, I'm presuming, from the Cleveland hostel, the hostel next to it as well in Joburg?
That's right, Stephen. In fact, there was a chairperson of the Induna in Johannesburg who spoke to us today alongside the Minister. And there is leadership that has been deployed to have these meetings with the Police Minister and other members of the security cluster. And if you look at that, that means then that this Induna represents all the Indunas from these different hostels. So the message would clearly get across to the various hostels that let us wait and see what comes out of this meeting with the Minister on Sunday. And if we don't get the desired results, then they would certainly go back to the kind of violence that we have seen. And certainly they don't want that to happen. Looking at as well, Stephen, I mean, this has now spread into the international community as well. Lots of condemnation regarding that.
Chriselda Lewis, thank you very much indeed. Well, indeed, yes, lots of international reaction. We'll go to Nigeria. We'll go to the chair of the African Union in Addis Ababa later in the program as well. Chriselda Lewis, thank you.